Hey guys, Ryan here, and here we are less than half a year after the toy line first arrived, and already we've amassed quite a decent looking set of different figures, fortunately including both Rangers and bad guys. They've all been covered really quite extensively by other reviewers, so I'm going to add my thoughts to them today as the 5 best and 5 worst things about the Beast Morphers action figures. Starting with the best, number 5, painted Ranger weapons. So in the Bandai era, we got very used to the Rangers' weapons all being one flat colour. So it was one of our initial surprises when it was revealed that Hasbro's Power Rangers were going to have painted weapons. For the Rangers at least, most of their weapons have at least 2 colours on, apart from the recent Silver Ranger release with his claw thing. Obviously they're not as nicely done as their Lightning Collection versions, but they are very close, and it certainly means less work for us in trying to correct the screen accuracy aspect. Number 4, realistic proportions. So again, as Power Rangers fans, we've been used to a certain kind of Ranger shape, and usually it's not been accurate. Obviously Bandai had an extensive back catalogue of action figures, peaking probably with the Jungle Fury action figure toy line, but since then it's kind of been downhill, and even if you consider everything from 2010, we've had those comic book proportion MMPR style toys, then we went to more 4-inch figures which always just seemed far too small. Then luckily we gained an extra inch back from Super Megaforce onwards with the new Action Hero mold, and to be honest I was perfectly satisfied with those for a very long time. So it's nothing short of bizarre how Hasbro in their first swoop have made those action heroes look like absolute oddities. Just look at how the red Beast Morpher Ranger stands beside the red Dino Charge 5-inch action hero. Suddenly the proportions all look completely out, whereas Hasbro have now embraced these slim proportions that's much more akin to the actors and indeed the Sentai suit actors. The Bandai versions are just so blocky, and you get the impression they were made with an element of ease, like this was the easiest way for them to deliver the output they needed to. Not quite as realistic as the Lightning Collection figures, which seem to use a lot more textures to imply there's creases in the suits, but you certainly get an impression of it with these new Hasbro figures, and again it's just something that makes them seem a lot more realistic and lifelike. Although between the Yellow Ranger and Roxy we've only got 2 female figures in the line, they seem much more realistic. They're not suffering from those weird tiny waists and other attributes that made the Bandai female figures seem more than just a little off. Number 3, 6-inch scale. I have to admit I was a little bit miffed at first to hear that Hasbro were going to change the action figure scale. I kind of saw it coming because their basic figures for things like Avengers are already in that 6-inch scale. It definitely seemed odd at first that our basic figures were going to be getting a size upgrade, but our collectors' figures were going to be getting a size downgrade. But they've actually just harmonized the whole thing. Everything now stands around 6 inches tall, which means that now you can happily stand your basic figures beside your collector's figures, and they're in scale. You could display them together if you wanted to. It's not like Bandai when the legacy figures were completely incompatible with any of, say, the monster figures they were putting out in the 5-inch scale. Also, as we progress through the Hasbro era, we're very rapidly starting to have a lot of figures in this scale. And so in a year's time, I don't think we're going to be questioning this scale at all. We're going to have so many figures that can all be used interchangeably. Number 2, Ranger Poseability. So here's another thing that worried me ahead of the final reveal of Hasbro's Power Ranger figures, was that they were going to severely cut back on articulation. We were used to a certain kind of movement and flexibility from Bandai. It was never perfect. For example, even the action heroes couldn't cross their arms over themselves, like I remember wanting to with Super Megaforce Red, but we forgave it. We got used to what we had, and to be honest, we were just pleased that they were taller again. And when the girls' figures couldn't do very much because their skirts limited their leg articulation, again, it was just the price to pay for something being a little more screen accurate. So I'm really pleased to say that Hasbro have retained what made Bandai's action figures great, and in fact they've added to it. With the ability to rotate forearms a little bit in front of them, the ability to recreate some promo shots is a lot easier than we've had from basic figures recently. And the best thing about them, number 1, selection of figures. So here in England, we actually only got the Beast Morphers toy line in July. And so to me, it feels like these figures have kind of come thick and fast. I was not expecting to already own 13 unique figures, 16 overall because I've bought a lot of Tronics, and for 2 more to be within reach relatively soon, those being the Red Fury Ranger and the Steel Beastbot Deluxe figure. For the sake of this video though, I didn't mind so much because they're technically just duplicates of of characters that we've already got out. But yeah, in sum, it's really great that Hasbro have retained the villains that we got so used to from the final few years of the Bandai reign, and also have been able to put out the 5 main rangers quite as quickly and as efficiently as they have. But then to also give us all 3 Beast Bots, 4 if you count Steel coming soon, hopefully. What do you guys think? Because to me, this has seemed like an absolute masterclass in how to put out a lot of very different figures in a very short space of time. I'm kind of excited to see where things go next year, because we've got most of the toys that you'd expect already. So where do we go from here? So those are all of the things that I'm quite impressed by this toy line. Fortunately though, not everything's always perfect, so here are my 5 worst things about them. Number 5, villain legs. So having just spoke about how good the Power Ranger figures are and how they've retained most of what made the action heroes great and actually expanded on them, bit disappointing to find that the villain figures don't get quite so much love. It became obvious even from the first wave as Blaze and the Tronics were released. Despite Blaze in the show being his kind of own Dark Ranger and the Dark Buster in Super Sentai, it was definitely quite the jolt to find that his legs had only marginal poseability, the kind of front back rocking hip joint and not the opening hip joint that the Rangers have. Weirdly, he has an ankle swivel and moving knees, but those don't really help you get any good poses because it means that you're spending forever trying to get the figure to balance basically on his toe. Unfortunately, as the waves have gone on, this villain feature has continued, and neither Roxy, Evox or Drilltron have any better leg poseability. Now I do appreciate not all of Bandai's villain figures had good leg poseability either, but they certainly gave it to the foot soldiers like the X-Borgs, and so that meant that you could give a lot more personality in their poses than you can with, say, the Tronics, where you kind of have to rely on what it can do with the weapons. It's good that they have the same arm articulation as the Rangers, but then that just makes you think even more, well, if they can do it for the arms, why can't they do it for the legs? It seems like a bit of a cost-saving mechanism. As does reason number 4, villains' weapons are unpainted. So like me, you might now be starting to think, why are villain figures getting the short end of the stick? Yes, the Ranger weapons are painted. The villain weapons, however, are starting to be a bit of a mixed bag. Yes, they painted Blaze's weapons, and the Tronic's 2 sidearms, which is just the same weapon twice. But the 3 villains since then have been on a bit of a decline, starting with Roxy, who has 2 guns. Yes, fair enough, they've given them in different colours, black or silver, but there's no extra colours on there, and actually Evox and Drilltron's weapons have been that horrible return of the flat grey plastic. It does make you think, what's next here? It cut deep, especially since Evox's staff was shown to have paint, at least in the prototype version shown off in February at the New York Toy Fair. Now obviously they want the Ranger weapons to look as appealing as possible so that they can make larger playable versions in the roleplay line. They're not going to be doing that with any of the villains' weapons, so you can see why they're cost cutting here, but I wish they wouldn't, because already you've got limited articulation on the villains' legs, and now to be degrading the weapons as well. Number 3, paint. This is kind of an overall thing, and I do appreciate in a $10 or £10 basic action figure line, they can't do everything, and there's going to have to be some parts that are left undone. I do like, however, that they still gave the detail for the things that they left unpainted, and most notably in the Ranger figures, it's the zips that run down the front of their suits, and also the Grid Battle Force or Go Buster silver transport emblems on their holsters. I think once you've added some black and silver paint to those, they look so much better, much more on par with what's missing, and why the Lightning Collection Red Ranger looks strikingly better than the basic line Red Ranger. Most recently, I obviously got the gold and silver Rangers, and again added some paint to their Grid Battle Force emblems. I did try and do the zips, but to be honest, on the Silver Ranger it was pointless, although on gold it does work. There has been some kind of paint mishap on each of the figures, but usually it's something that you can deal with, or just scratch off. What I would say though is if you get the opportunity to choose your own figure in a store, then go for that, because sometimes you can rifle through multiples of the same figure and find really bad paint errors on each one. Smash, for example, was a figure that I bought online and has some really bad smudges around his knees and legs, kind of renegade silver paint that's gone everywhere. There's even some scratching to it, and I'm not massively happy with that one, especially considering that it's one of the more expensive deluxe figures. Number 2, keys as weapons. So one of the extra features that the box advertises is that the keys, which can be used with the Morpher, can also be used as a sort of arm mounted sword blade thing, but to me it looks odd. They're not really blades. And what, everyone is supposed to be fighting with the exact same weapon? They're oversized, they're not even holding them in their arms, and the fact that you get their more screen used weapons means that using the keys as a weapon is never really going to be a consideration for me. Also, for the purpose of this video, I actually clipped one onto one of the Tronics, and while removing it, it scratched off the paint on the glove and randomly even the pink plastic. I remember when these figures were released, people were having some scratching to the cuffs and the silver on their trio of main Ranger figures. So yeah, clip on at your own discretion. And the number one worst reason, loose legs. So this for me at the moment is the worst thing about this toy line, is that you have no idea until you get them out the packet whether the legs are going to be fine or not fine, and it seems completely random. Some people have had real problems with Roxy, but mine's fine. My worst figure is the Yellow Ranger. Her legs are so wobbly, I'm actually pleased they gave her the rubbery skirt. I imagine that stopped her from falling over plenty of times now. Gold Ranger's a bit of a weird one because although I couldn't prove it for this video, sometimes it does give me some hassle in the hip joint, and certainly one of the legs is definitely looser than the other. Cruz is another one that I expect better from. As a £15 deluxe figure, the fact that it always wants to fall backwards because its thighs are a little bit loose is very annoying. I feel like they knew the weight factor was going to be a problem because they've severely limited Cruz's ability for the thighs to move backwards, but they are definitely loose, and I find myself having to really push the figure forward to stop him from falling backwards. The loose legs is the thing that really plagues this toy line, and it's something that you just have to kind of try your luck on, because until you get that thing out of the plastic, you're not going to know. There's something about the plastic quality to these figures where it's just a little bit too rubbery. Add to that total looseness in the hip joints and it's just a recipe for disaster, and one will often take the rest out. So those to me are the 5 worst things about the Beast Morphers toy line, but overall I think this is a really great start for Hasbro, and it's been really fun to be able to collect far more than I thought I would be able to in such a short period of time. 3 of the 4 Beast bots with another to come, and most of the main villains, but there's a few more I hope we get there. I am curious, what's to come in Season 2? Is it just like power-up modes? It's definitely exciting though, and I'm sure I for one will certainly be there to buy a few more. So I hope you've enjoyed this review, guys. Follow me on Instagram at powerrangergram. Let me know your thoughts on the Beast Morphers action figures. Do you think it's better or worse than the Bandai era? Thanks for watching, and see you later.